Welcome to the Actionable Futurist podcast, a show all about the near-term future with practical and actionable advice from a range of global experts to help you stay ahead of the curve. Every episode answers the question, what's the future of? With voices and opinions that need to be heard. Your host is international keynote speaker and actionable futurist Andrew Grill.
My guest today is James Butland, the Vice President of Financial Partnerships EMEA for Airwallex. He is responsible for supporting efforts to build local operations and processes to scale the business across EMEA. An experienced fintech professional, James has more than a decade's experience working in the financial and tech industry, with expertise across growing business, payments, FX, business relationship management, and risk management. Prior to joining Airwallex, he was at Wise, formerly TransferWise, as their European banking lead, where he focused on building out its European banking network. Welcome, James.
Thank you.
Now, a big topic today, we're going to look at the future of the financial services industry. We've only got 40 minutes, so it's a huge topic. But before we get into that, how would you describe Airwallex?
So we're a global payments platform. So the ethos around Airwallex is really helping businesses who are based locally, whether that be in the UK or Europe or the US, expand internationally. So when we started the platform, it was really about how we enable business to pay out locally in different parts of the world. And now, 6 years later, we help them collect funds, do the FX in the middle, spend on a virtual card. So it's really a full stack end-to-end finance platform for any business looking to move outside their domestic market.
Now, clearly listeners know that I'm Australian and know there's an Australian connection here. I was actually at an event at Australia House around fintechs with some of your colleagues in the industry. It's a fascinating story. How did Airwallex get started back in Oz?
Airwallex actually started in Melbourne. The real plan around the original product was helping Australian SMEs manage their finances, but also expand outside of Australia. I joined back in 2017 as one of the first employees outside of Australia to really help bridge that connection between Europe and Australia. But, you know, Australian fintech just Australian entrepreneurship has grown exponentially in the past 5 years. So you've got people like Airwallex, but then also people like Canva doing very well as well. So it's a real tech hub. And I think what we found is a great pool of talent, a friendly regulator, and it was a great place to start the business and then sort of push out to the rest of the world.
And it proves the model because you're a business that wanted to grow outside of Australia. You land in a different country. There are different regulations around hiring. In a way, I'm sure you're proving your own product by having you and others being able to expand outside that. But where do you fit in the whole fintech ecosystem? It's unfair to say you're just an FX provider. You're so much more, aren't you?
If you look at someone who just provides FX, a traditional FX brokerage, they'll just get you an FX rate, but they won't give you any more services around that. So our platform gives you a local bank account in your home country, but in an afternoon we can give you local bank accounts in 5, 6, 7 different countries all around the world. We can enable you to accept funds locally in different countries, pay out locally in different countries. And then also on top of that, we've built an issuing platform so we can give you and your employees cards to spend in different currencies. And I think what we see, especially in Asia and the UK and Europe, where we're not denominated in dollars, a lot of costs are incurred in dollars or foreign currency. So we enable our businesses to pay in that local currency rather than paying in the home currency, which is usually a lot cheaper, and they could be saving 4 or 5% on the FX and £30-40 on a payment at a time.
So it's fair to say the financial services industry is fairly fragmented in various countries, and some would say it's quite broken. What was the gap in the financial services space that caused Airwallex to be started in the first place?
2 things. I think one, technology. So technology had advanced to a point where you could create these global platforms and scale them as well. I think the other big catalyst was 2008, the financial crisis. You saw big financial institutions like the RBS and ABN AMRO deal collapse, people like Citi, HSBC withdraw from international markets. If you go back another 10 years, following September the 11th, banks also steered away from doing cross-border or moving money due to the higher KYC concentration and the risk of, I guess, fines from the local regulator. So where we sort of fit in is we look at that traditional correspondent banking model, which they were pulled out of because it was very expensive and very complex. And we just took a fresh look at it and said, okay, if we could build this today with modern technology, how would we connect different financial institutions in different countries to offer a seamless experience to our clients?
You mentioned the 2008 issues. 4 years ago, there was the launch of open banking here in the UK and across the EU. I know Australia has its own variant of that. Has that helped you because now systems have to be more open? Luckily, you build a technology stack from scratch. Big banks you mentioned have all got legacy platforms. Talk to me about how open banking has helped and maybe where it needs to go further and be more responsive to consumer needs.
Do consumers understand open banking and do they want to use it? And I think everyone was expecting 4 years ago this sort of big bang approach when everyone would stop sending bank transfers and start using open banking, and it just hasn't happened. And I think it's going to be a much slower burn to get consumers to understand the benefits of open banking. At the moment in the industry, there's two things going on. There's this rapid change in technology and innovation with things like open banking. But on the other side, there's this focus from the bigger banks on fraud. And if you send a payment from your bank account, you'll be met with multiple warnings of, are you sure this person's real? Are you sure, these are the right account numbers? Things like confirmation of payee, which has come in to validate bank account numbers to provide comfort. But I think a lot of consumers are still very hesitant to try a new technology or service like open banking because they're so concerned with the fraud aspect on the other side, the messages they're getting from the bank. So I think trust is the cornerstone of what we need to sort of build with these new technologies. Open banking, I use it. It works great. It's easier than going in and doing a manual transfer. You can just connect your bank. But for someone who's not in this industry or doesn't understand what's going on behind the scenes, I guess it can be a bit disconcerting. So there needs to be a lot more education by the bigger banks around the benefits of open banking without the focus on the risk of fraudulent payments. I see them as two separate things.
You've developed a banking as a service offering. We hear a lot about these something as a service models. So what is your offering and how does it differ from other fintechs in the market?
When you look at something as a service, what we are offering our clients is the ability to embed financial services into their platform without their clients being redirected to an Airwallex. So we provide the financial infrastructure. So if you're a marketplace, for example, you move a lot of money around, between accounts, between your clients to your suppliers, and you can do that via Airwallex. We sit behind the scenes and we will manage all of that cash flow and those international payments for businesses. I think what's really powerful about embedded finance or banking as a service is you don't have to move the funds out into a bank and then back onto your books. You can actually embed that into your own platform. So that really helps with a lot of aspects. I mean, price, we can do this cheaper than moving your funds in and out with a traditional bank. Speed, you can do it instantly, so you don't have to wait for funds to arrive. You don't have that trust aspect I mentioned earlier of where's my money, because you know where it is at all times because it's in your platform. And transparency, you know exactly what you're going to get from both of those price and speed aspects before you start moving money around. So that's the real benefit of embedding that, is you have full control of your finances in your business.
I suppose consumers are now getting used to embedded services. So, for example, if I want to buy a ticket on a website, rather than having to go off to the ticketing website, you can now embed an Eventbrite module in there and I never leave the site. I stay on there and I see the brand and I trust that. Part of it is the trust. So if I'm dealing with a company I have a relationship with, rather than having to go to my bank, I just need to trust they're doing things behind the scenes. So where do you come into, the security aspects and all those sort of things to make it seamless and allow consumers to trust what they're doing on this site is actually dealing with their bank in a secure way?
I think trust really is the cornerstone of any new financial service. And it's not the same as using Deliveroo, right? Because you use Deliveroo once, you don't like, you're not going to use it again. But, when you're moving your money or you're sending your money, it can be, in the hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of pounds. So you need to trust that. So there's lots of things we are part of behind the scenes. So we are FCA registered. directly. So we're not an agent of another company. We are directly licensed by the local regulator in the countries we operate. So whether you're dealing with Airwallex UK or Airwallex Australia, will always be regulated, and then your funds will always be safeguarded and segregated. We're not like a bank. We can't do anything with the funds that our clients send us. We can't go lend them out to someone else and then go buy a house. All the money you send us, we have to hold in a safeguarded pool. And then more broadly, when you're sending payments to us or receiving payments, we're principal members of Visa and MasterCard. On the acquiring side, we're a principal issuer of Visa. So using Airwallex, you have the same connection as you would with a bank, but with the benefit of the money you send us, we're not doing anything with, we're just holding it for you.
Sounds like banking as a service could be quite complicated. There are lots of moving parts, but can people actually have almost like an a la carte service where I just want this module, and as my business grows, I can add more and more and have you do all that in the background?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we would love every client to take every single product we offer, but as you know, not everyone wants everything. So we have some clients who just want the acquiring product. Maybe they have their own website and they just want a payment gateway, which we can give them. Some clients just want to do payouts and get a competitive FX rate, which they're not getting from their traditional bank, which we can give them. So the platform is completely modular in terms of what you take, and you don't have to take the whole product. You can take subsets of that, and then there's different ways you can interact. We have a sort of an internet banking platform which we call the web app, or you can go direct into our suite of APIs. So it really depends on the size of your business and what you're looking to get out of the product.
So I love one of your taglines that's you don't need a bank to run your business. That's a bold statement, but what does that mean in practice?
You don't need to use a bank as a standalone institution. You can use Airwallex as a platform. Now, behind Airwallex, we will use banks as well to actually hold those funds, ring fence them, safeguard them. So the benefit of the platform is we have multiple banks all around the world. So you're not using just one institution here on the high street in the UK, which has a limited scope of products. And the reason why we've connected all these different banks together is to give the best possible service. So there'll be a bank behind the scenes to hold the money and to ring fence them, but you're not being limited by one institution. We're giving you the breadth of multiple institutions in multiple regions around the world.
A lot of the services you're providing are disruptive deliberately, and the banks are watching probably. How do you think established banks feel about these alternate banking systems?
I think if you look at the industry, most of payments are still done by the banks. The banks are our partners, so we work with the banks. And the way I see it is we are bringing more volume, more customers to them as well. So it's a mutually beneficial partnership. They get something out of it, we get something out of it. And what we're trying to do is say to that UK business who probably has a bank account at Lloyds or NatWest or Barclays, use Airwallex for your international spend, use us for your card spend. It would be very unlikely that they would get rid of their standalone bank account. And I think that comes down to the disruptive element, but also we are trying to help businesses grow. So we're not trying to take their business away from a traditional institution. We're saying we're different from a traditional institution. We're here to help you grow. And as their volumes grow, we'll be part of that growth story.
Do you think there's a risk, though, that a big high street bank will start to offer their own banking as a service proposition to compete directly?
I think a lot of them have moved into the fintech space as well. We saw JP Morgan launch their Chase bank app a few weeks ago, and I think that's consumer focused at the moment. But over time, they will go into banking as a service. There are other banks like Citi and HSBC who have more sort of treasury products. But what I would say is it's a very different onboarding experience. So when we're talking to a business, we can have them up and running in an afternoon. Whereas if you go to one of the bigger banks and ask for a treasury product or a global platform, it'll probably take you weeks, if not months, to get set up with them. So it's a different offering. But you're right. I think over time we will see them looking more and more at fintech and saying what parts of that can we take on. And then I think inevitably we will see things like acquisitions happening. Visa's done a lot recently. They bought Currency Cloud and they bought Tink, the open banking provider. So you will see, I think, those bigger institutions either try and compete or acquire fintechs to enhance their product offerings.
So you've released a report that looks at SME decision makers in the fintech and finance industry across the UK and the US. What did you find when it comes to the challenges they face?
Transparency around what they're actually paying, where they're paying it, and just awareness of they don't need to pay fees all the time. I think the most common thing we hear from our SMEs and businesses is they're paying fees to send money over to the US or collect money in the US, and what they'll do is they'll go to their bank and they'll be given a US dollar account, but a US dollar account not based in the US, so it doesn't really solve that problem. And when we talk to clients and we can say, look, we can give you a US dollar account onshore in the US, you act like a local company without having a local, office or boots on the ground in your business. So I think price and speed of transfers is probably the most important thing we hear, and that's probably our biggest selling point. And what we've seen as we've launched the issuing product and our expense management platform is that visibility and transparency around what they're spending in the business, who internally is spending it, how to track their finances over time. I think that, coupled with the international pay-ins and payouts, is a very powerful proposition. But you're right, it's about awareness and really sort of saying to people there's a different way of managing your finances.
One of the areas I hadn't considered was recruitment and hiring globally. Your report said that just 3% of UK and US fintech and finance SMEs have the infrastructure in place to be able to hire globally. And I suppose that comes down to not just offering someone a job, but actually being able to pay them if you're not there and don't have an office there. So talk to me how the hiring, the global hiring, is impacted by the lack of services and how you plug that gap.
Hiring people globally is very challenging. I mean, hiring people locally is very challenging in the UK, for example. Once you work how much to pay people, and then the whole payroll cycle, and a lot of it's still done off back, so you've got sort of 2 to 3 days to get money out to people. So I think hiring locally is difficult, and then when you move into other countries, you usually need a local bank account to do that, because people want to be paid on time, and rightly so. And then if you're paying from a different country, you have the risk that not all the money will arrive. If it's a SWIFT payment, there'll be a haircut along the way, or you don't know when those funds will land. So with the local bank infrastructure, whether it's hiring or paying rent or setting up an office, we can get people set up pretty quickly in a new country. And being Australian, I'm sure you've had to set up a bank account when you moved outside of Australia, and that can be quite a very difficult process, right? You can't do the bank account until you have an address, and so what we try and do is give them those tools to set up outside of their home country before they even get boots on the ground, so they have that infrastructure ready for when they arrive.
Interesting story. When I moved, there was a deal at the time in Sydney. You actually put some money in a Travelex account. They then opened an HSBC account with a credit card here in London. So we got here, went to the HSBC branch, and it was there waiting. And people that actually were working here for Australian banks said, how did you do that? Unless you have an address, you don't exist. You can't get a mobile phone contract. You can't rent a house and those sort of things. So it is a whole issue. One of the other stats in the report, 18% of respondents believe the lack of the right technology to support a global workforce is a key barrier. And I think now that we've got distributed workforces, you've now got the ability to hire someone that's not within driving distance of the office. And now people are saying we can hire someone in a different country. We're never going to have an office there, but they are the most amazing coder or developer. We just need to have them. Is your platform going to help people expand where they don't have a physical presence, but actually have people working remotely in a distributed way? Because that's the future.
That's one of the main drivers around the product, is to enable companies now to expand internationally. I mean, we do it ourselves at Airwallex, and we use our own products. So we've hired people all over the world, and especially since COVID, we've hired people in Germany, in France, and who work from home, but they're the best in their field, and it doesn't really matter now where they are. So it's about giving them the tools to not only pay those people, but ensure that they have, the ability to, if they need an Airwallex corporate card, we can give them to them so they can pay their expenses. So absolutely, I think now what we're seeing is businesses aren't held back by national borders, and that is the reason why the product's there to support businesses in different parts of the world.
You recently raised a further $100 million led by Lone Pine Capital and joined by 1835i Ventures, which, interesting, is the venture arm of the Australian New Zealand Banking Corp and Sequoia Capital in China. Some well-known investors in there and, surprisingly, for me at least, the VC arm of a leading Australian bank. Do you think we'll see more smart mainstream banks like the ANZ investing in alternate banking platforms?
One of the challenges that mainstream banks have is they're built on legacy infrastructure of, some cases 100, 150 years they've been going for. So they've realized that, the future of technology is moving so fast, they need to invest in new platforms and new services because it's so difficult to build it in-house. And I think, we've talked a bit about JP Morgan's new app, but also NatWest has a subsidiary called Metal as well here in the UK, and they've built them completely separate from their core bank infrastructure. And when you talk to any big bank, you're going to have I would say, probably 4 to 5 lead time to build anything like this. So I think you'll see banks realizing the opportunity in fintech, needing to act fast and not wanting to miss out.
So you're growing. Are you hiring at the moment? Who are you looking for? And in case they're listening to this podcast, how can they get in touch?
The biggest growth areas are probably US, Europe, and Singapore. We're looking for anyone with a strong interest in fintechs and payments. Our acquiring product's still very new, so online payments is very, very topical for us. And then we're looking also really to expand local business development on the ground in most regions around the world. So we do two things. We have customers inbound coming to self-serve through the platform, but we also do a lot of outbound and have sort of dedicated account managers. So yeah, anyone in that space who's looking for a new challenge, it's all there on our website on airwallex.com. You can see our career page, and yeah, we'd love to hear from anyone with a strong interest in fintech, payments, or wanting to work in the future of finance.
Almost out of time, but I want to ask you about how you innovate. Obviously, you're a fast-moving business in multiple markets and multiple countries. How do you innovate and develop even better products?
I think for us, we're 100% client-driven. So we listen to our clients and understand what their pain points are. And even if they're not asking for a product, we listen to their problems and formulate a product to try and solve that where we can. I think for us, the plan is to always sort of stay ahead of the curve. When I joined at Airwallex, we were a much smaller company, about 20 people globally. We're now 1,300. We do a lot more in terms of volume and have a wider product suite. So when sort of 5 years ago we were disrupting the incumbent fintechs, we've got people now snapping our heels trying to disrupt us. So the plan is to keep on innovating and building products that our clients really love. I think the good news is a lot of that heavy lift around the infrastructure, regulation, licensing we've done now. So really it's about we can put all our effort into the product suite and how we can capture more market share, but also ensure that our current clients are sticky and like using us.
So my favourite part of the show, I want to run you through a quick fire round so we learn a bit more about you. iPhone or Android?
Android.
Window or aisle?
Aisle.
Online or in the room?
In the room.
What's the app you use most on your phone?
Probably Spotify or Google Maps.
The one thing you won't be doing again post-pandemic?
Family parties on Zoom.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Nothing lasts forever.
What are you reading at the moment?
The travel books by Paul Theroux, Louis Theroux's dad. I'm reading one about his railway journey across Europe and Asia.
Who should I invite next onto the podcast?
Elon Musk.
The second person to say that. If you're listening, the challenge has been put out twice now. I think we'd all like to have Elon on the podcast. So as this is the Actionable Futurist podcast, we want to leave our guests with actionable things they should be doing today when it comes to driving new value for businesses around financial platforms and services.
Talk to your customers, listen to them, and then make a short, mid and long-term plan. I think what I've learned at Airwallex, a lot of things we've done don't seem valuable at the time, but they come good 2-3 years later. So you need to really have that long-term view of your business, listen to your customers and understand what they really want.
James, how can people find out more about you and your work?
You can find Airwallex online. You can find us on YouTube. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And yes, I've got wealth of information around Airwallex and the platform, which is all on YouTube. So yeah, look me up on LinkedIn, but also check out our YouTube channel as well.
James, what a fantastic discussion today. Thank you so much for your time.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Actionable Futurist podcast. You can find all of our previous shows at actionablefuturist.com. And if you like what you've heard on the show, please consider subscribing via your favourite podcast app so you never miss an episode. You can find out more about Andrew and how he helps corporates navigate a disruptive digital world with keynote speeches and C-suite workshops delivered in person or virtually at actionablefuturist.com. Until next time, this has been the Actionable Futurist podcast.